Good morning, and thank you so much for joining me for a daily spot with Dr. Angela. I am your host, Dr. Angela Buckchester. You know what I like to do on the show. I want to enlighten, inspire, and empower you to become your best self. Now, Scripture reminds us that the tongue is a small thing that makes grand speeches, but a tiny spark can set a great forest on fire. And today we want to get you fired up about interesting biblical facts about Israel's historical background. My guest today is T.J. Johnson, and we are talking about her book, The Genesis Men, Jacob and Sons, 12 Tribes. Now, it's going to be a quite interesting talk because guess what? She has written a whole series of books. Well, we're going to talk mostly about one today, but I'm sure she can give us a little teaser about the rest. Now, you know what I'm about to say. Go on, get comfy, get cozy, get your coffee or get your tea because we are about to get started. Good morning, TJ. Thank you so much for being on Daily Spot today.
Good morning.
So before we talk about your book, I would love to ask you more of a personal question, and that is this. Who is T.J. Johnson? What makes you the person that you are?
I am still a mystery to myself, actually. I am still discovering who I am. It took me many, many years to just become comfortable with who I was, who I am now. But today I am a senior citizen. I am a writer, of course, and I teach Bible study classes wherever and whenever possible. That's what I love to do. I am a mother of two, a son and a daughter. And other than that, and just being a mother of my church and a servant at my church and doing whatever I can to help other people, that's me.
Now, what made you decide that with all that you've done that you wanted to add author to that list?
Well, that was a long time coming. That was one of the things that I finally discovered that God was leading me to do. For many years, of course, I've heard other people also ask or say, I don't know what my calling is. I don't know what God wants me to do. I don't know what my gift is. Well, I was in that category of people, and it came by way of just journaling about myself and problems I was having at the time. And I found that in doing that and writing about what was going on in insights, I discovered that I could lose myself for hours and not know what time it was. And I, besides helping myself get through that tough time, I discovered that I also enjoyed writing about Bible scenarios and writing my own lessons for my Sunday school class or for my computer class. So that's how I really got into writing.
Now, you have a series of books, The Genesis Men, and it looks like The Genesis Men, Adam and Sons, The Genesis Men, Noah and Sons, The Genesis Men, Abraham and Sons, and The Genesis Men, Jacob and Sons, 12 Tribes. What made you decide that you wanted to talk about a series of books that would start off The Genesis Men?
Yeah, that took me a little bit, and it seems like everybody wants to know that. I've even gotten the question, why didn't I write about Genesis women? Well, so my answer to that is the man was created before the woman was created. However, the reason that I finally decided on Genesis was because it was an answer to a prayer. I prayed about it and asked God, what should I do? Where should I start? Since I was going to do these books. It came with problems that I was having understanding the people of Israel And why they could not get along. Of course, we all have that problem, but it seems just such a big issue in Israel about the land and whose land is it, and about the temple and whose temple is it. And in order to understand them, I felt like I had to go back to the beginning. The second thought along those lines is that Genesis means beginning. And it was the beginning of my writing ministry. So it just kind of all tied together. And before we could talk about men, we had to talk about how men got here, how the world was created and all that. So that all goes back to Genesis. And it seemed like the perfect place to start. So that's why.
Now, you were mentioning that if we want to talk about this particular subject matter, we need to start at the very beginning. You could have gone in a very scientific direction, but you chose to go in a biblical direction. Why did you choose to share that research and that particular understanding with your reader?
Because, number one, I'm not a scientific kind of person. And number two, because I understand the Bible more than I do science. And number three, because I really think that the Bible and science kind of goes together. However, I know that people are still talking about science proving the Bible, but to me the Bible proves science, and in the end they all link together.
Now, if someone is interested in the book, and let's say the cover captures their attention, do they need to be pretty savvy when it comes to biblical understanding or reference, or can they be kind of a newbie to the faith and still be able to understand what you're sharing with them?
Hopefully, it would. The book would prove helpful for any student of the Bible, no matter what level they're at, especially if they're in a group study. Group studies tend to help each person who's involved in that study because so many different ideas come out, and it just helps you understand things better. So I've had different levels of people in my Bible classes with these books. I have taught 3 of them already, and the 4th one we're due to start next year. And there are different levels of people in the class, and they really, really love the book.
Now, with all that you share, because like we did mention that it is a series, were you only using the Bible as your resource, or were you able to bring in some other resources that folks are familiar with?
Yes. Well, of course, the Bible is my base, and I use King James because it doesn't have to be. I don't have to get permission to use the King James for the materials I use. But I also have plenty of other references, one of them being Unger's Bible Dictionary and Manners and Customs of the Bible, the ABCs of the Bible, and there's a really excellent website. I don't know if I'm permitted to mention that or not, but I've used it for over 20 years, and it just kind of, you can break down you can get definitions for words that we tend to take for granted, but I've learned that words that are familiar to us can mean something entirely different depending on how it's used and which kind of scenario or what the story is presenting. We have many words that have different meanings depending on what we're saying. So this Bible website, blueletterbible.com, I use that to do research on what the words mean and who is who, because there's so many people named the same thing in the Bible. Just as today we name our children after after our mothers or after our ancestors. So this is the same thing as the Bible says. There's nothing new under the sun. It all repeats itself. So.
I like how you were mindful in it all, and you wanted to include other references so that people would be able to know, hey, let me go over here. So if I want to go a little deeper into the conversation, or if I don't understand something, even though she's explained it, I can still go there. That's very mindful of you. I love that. I love that. When you were writing, what made you decide that you wanted to pull or choose Adam, Noah, Abraham, Jacob? Why those particular people?
Because everything started with Adam. Well, after the creation of the world and animals and vegetation and all that. Adam was the first man, so he is our ancestor, and that was one of the things that I was looking to discover in writing about Genesis. Our history began in Genesis, and so as all of us, all the millions of people in the world came from Adam and Eve in the beginning, that was one thing. And, of course, there was a finer distinction after the flood, and Noah and his sons repopulated the earth. So that's the reason for Adam. The reason for Noah is because, as I just said, after the flood, his sons repopulated the earth, and then the next person in that series would be Abraham. And Abraham is, to the Jews, is the father it is their ancestral father. Throughout the Bible, there's this theme of three men, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And they are considered, these are the men who were, I call them, they were the father of the promise. They were the fathers of the promise of the land that God promised Abraham. And his seed. So his seed would come through Isaac and not Ishmael, and that's where the problem started. And as I understand it, that's where the problem started with the fight for the land, because Isaac is the second-born, Ishmael was the firstborn, and the firstborn, of course, had many privileges that the other sons did not. So as God made the promise to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, and then after Jacob there are the 12 sons that he had, and those became the 12 tribes. So that's why the series and the names on the book.
I love it. Well, it is almost time for us to go to break. When we get back, I would love to talk a little bit more about Jacob and the research that you did with the 12 tribes. But before we do that, let me ask you if you would remind everyone, please, what is the title of your book, where can we get a copy, and how do we follow you online?
Okay, the name of the book is The GEneisis Men, Jacob and Sons, 12 Tribes. It's available through Amazon. It's available through my website, tjbiblebooks.com. It's available through Arthur House, who published the book. And did I say Amazon.com?
Yes.
Okay, I didn't want to forget that. It's available there also.
Alrighty, listeners, now you know where you can get a copy of the book. We'll be back right after this.
Discovery. No, just a sec.
What would it look like if we listened more? Could the right voice, the right set of words, bring us all just a little closer? Get us to open up? Even push us further? It could, if we took the time to listen. The most inspiring minds, the most compelling stories. Download Audible and listen for a change.
And we are back. Thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I am your host, Dr. Angela Butts-Chester. My guest today is T.J. Johnson, and we're talking about her newest book in the GEneisis Men series entitled The GEneisis Men, Jacob and Sons, 12 Tribes. Now, before we went to break, TJ, you mentioned that Jacob was the next in line, and we have an understanding of the 12 tribes. For someone who isn't familiar with Jacob and these 12 tribes, can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Okay. The 12 tribes are just identifies his 12 sons. Jacob had 12 sons, had one daughter. And of course, in the Bible, the women at that time were not named. This one was. But Jacob's 12 sons were to be the, how shall I say? Anyway, they became the fathers of the Israelite people. And each group were assigned a portion of the land when they actually came to what was known, or what is known in the Bible as the Promised Land, happens to be Canaan. And, of course, we know that Moses led the Israelite people out of Egypt, and it took them 40 years to get to a place that would have really taken them 11 days if they had obeyed how God was leading them. But anyway, the 12 sons, and I will name them for you. Reuben was the oldest. Simeon, Levi, who became the tribe that had the order of the priests. Judah is the son that is an ancestor of Jesus Christ. Zebulun, Issachar, however you want to pronounce that. Dan, Gad, Asher, Naphtali, Joseph, and Benjamin. So those are the 12 sons of Jacob. And actually, Jacob also adopted the two sons of Joseph. Those sons he adopted as his own. So actually, when you think about it legally, Jacob had 14 sons and not 12. However, nowhere in the Bible does it say 14 sons. It also says 12 sons. It also says 12 tribes. However, there are different parts of the Bible where different names in that 12 sons list are omitted. A lot of times it's Levi because Levi was not assigned land per se. And sometimes the names of Joseph's two sons will appear, Ephraim and Manasseh, or one or the other in place of Joseph. So it gets a little bit deep, to say the least.
So, TJ, my next question for you is, how does this book relate or compare to Israel today?
Okay. Yes, well, one thing, these same people, Genesis, the 12 tribes who are the ancestors of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, these are the people who live in Israel today, mainly, along with the children of Ishmael and Esau. Esau was Jacob's twin brother, but he gave up his birthright to Jacob, and so he was disinherited. And, of course, the fact that Ishmael was not in the line of succession for the land, he also was disinherited. And so it actually explains a lot of why there's so much fighting about who lives where, which line to cross, where the temple is, and it just explains so much to me. I just had such a hard time understanding what in the world's going on. And especially since these people are our examples from the Bible, why couldn't they get along? But, it's just makes it plainer to me and hopefully to other people who will read it. It explains a lot of how the people of Israel live, how they think, and why they're so proud and possessive of what is theirs. And still today there are people, of course, there's still the conflict there and has been, and the Bible tells us that it will be. So it will be until he says so.
Mm-hmm. Well, you talk about the fact that there are siblings that are represented in the 12 tribes. With large families, we know that there's always going to be conflict and happiness. There's going to be joy and sunshine, but there's going to be, rain and a little bit of havoc sometimes that is reached. So with that being said, did you find that you were able to write from kind of a traditional point of view where you had a protagonist character in the book, or were you more so sharing from a research point of view?
I think it's a mixture of the two. The fact that I'm writing about 12 men and their families. However, it's also about how they were to live, which was to represent God and His goodness and His mercy and His love and everything that they did and everywhere they went, because they were chosen to be a representative flavor for people to follow. This is how you live. This is how you serve God. So to me, it doesn't concentrate on any one character unless it's God and He's in the background, but He is in charge of everything and He controls everything. So I think it's just how they were to live and how they did live, and sometimes they did good, and a lot of times they did bad. And when they did things the right way, they were rewarded, as we are today. And when they were not, oh Lord, they were really punished severely, because He wiped out so many people a couple of times just because they disobeyed. And of course, Moses didn't get to the promised land because he disobeyed God, and his brother didn't get to the promised land because he disobeyed. So I really think, in order to answer your question with what you asked, I think it's more from a research point of view than traditional how-to or just answer the question. It's really filled with, the student will have to research and do some research and some study. That way, to me, you understand more because you're kind of digging for yourself, not just taking somebody else's word for it.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of such, for the person who is a student of the Bible, how does this book help them in their spiritual development? Or for those who may have joined a little late, because I asked a version of this in the last segment, and that was, is the book for everyone, or would you say it's more so for that student of the Bible to help them dig a little deeper?
Well, there is a section at the very end of the book that I call a challenge, and it just challenges people to go a little bit deeper than for what is asked. Now, as I said before also, I found that people who were not very versed in biblical tradition and literature and the commands and what God wants us to do, found the book and, the teaching and the discussion very helpful. However, actual a Bible student pro, this may be a little bit elementary for them. However, I would just challenge them to take a look at it and see what they can get out of it, especially the challenging section. And there's a section called, let me see, what is it called? Challenge. It just says challenge questions. So I challenged the student of the Bible to take a look at it and see. And I would just welcome any feedback.
Of course, I can imagine. It's always nice to have feedback from those who have purchased the book. I love that. Now, if someone may be saying, well, surely with all of the research that you did, that you are an expert on the subject matter, and you're going to share from that expert position. Do you find that do you call yourself an expert when it comes to your research? And the flip side of the question is, do you feel that you shared information from that perspective, or did you try to make sure that you wrote it in kind of everyday language so that more people would be able to understand?
I'm smiling because, yes, no, I am by no ways an expert. Of course, I have been studying the Bible and writing. I've written Bible lessons for many years, and I love writing, so I write a lot. And I love Bible study, so I do that a lot. I am by no means an expert. And actually, when I write and when I teach, I try and make things very, very basic. I challenge the students, to think and to find the answer rather than telling them. I love maps, and so I use lots of maps, and it comes in handy so that we can see the land that we're talking about. So,
right.
Yes, that's the perspective that I wrote the book from.
And that's such a wonderful addition that you added there with the maps, especially with the names of land masses changing over time, and we're not familiar, or in our minds, so many times it's as though people think that the places in the Bible is some mythological place, almost. Like they don't really realize that it's like, oh, is that modern day Iran or Iraq or Turkey or it's like they really don't, unless you're talking about Israel, or you say the name Jerusalem, it's like, oh yeah. But every place else seems to be this very mythical place to people. So thank you for adding that. It really does make a world of difference. It really, really does. Now, when you were writing, did you have a particular target date in mind to be completed with the project, or did you say, I'm going to write until I know that it is done? What was your process?
Actually, when I started this book, I did a rough draft of all the books that I did, and that was back in 2003, 2004, so it's taken me a long time. But I did not have a target date in mind. No, it's just when I finished one section of it, then I started defining or refining the next book. And there's a lot of things that happened between 2004 and 2018 when this book was published. So I just wrote until I felt like it was done.
I love it, because you never know what God wants to share with his people. So I love that you said you just kept writing until you knew that it was complete. I love that. I love it. Well, T.J. Johnson, thank you so much for spending time with me today and telling us about our series. If you could please, for one last time, can you remind everyone what is the title of your series, where can they get a copy, and how do we stay in contact with you?
Okay, the title of the book again, The GEneisis Men, Jacob and Sons, 12 Tribes. And it's, of course, available through Amazon.com. Everybody seems to like that because you can get the books right away, or you can get your materials right away. You can also get it from ArthurHouse.com. You could get it from my website, which takes you to a place where you can order the book from Amazon.com. You can stay in touch with me through my website, tjbiblebooks.com.
All righty. Thank you again for spending time with us today.
All right. Thank you.
And listeners, thank you as well for tuning in and spending time with me today. I hope that I have enlightened, inspired, and empowered you to become your best self. And as always, may you find that God shines his light upon you. May you receive his grace and his mercy in all that you do. Until next time, everyone, remember that you are blessed in the Lord. Bye-bye.